What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the BlockHash podcast. Today, I have another wonderful guest, Michael Heinrich, here to talk about Zero G and what they're working on, and maybe diving into a little bit more of decentralized AI, which has also become a massive part of the Web3 space as of recently. So excited to learn about what they're doing and how they're building in this industry. So, Michael, welcome onto the show, man. It's a pleasure to have you. How you doing today?
Doing really well. Hi from San Francisco. Nice to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. So to kick it off, usually what we do is we do some quick introductions of who the guest or guests are, and that kind of gives a little bit of background to the audience about yourself. Would love to know a little bit about your story, if you don't mind sharing some of your background and how you kind of wound up in Web3 and I guess, AI as well.
For sure. So I'm from Berlin originally, and ever since I can remember, I've been around, I think, computers. Like my dad used to run a software company, and then he switched over to working for SAP. And then with SAP, we moved to Silicon Valley when I was a teenager. And then I was a little bit bored in high school, and I just used to like hang out SAP Labs in Palo Alto, and just kind of minding my own business, just like surfing the internet, lots of fast internet connection, like once in a while helping some people like defragment their hard drives, and they were like, "Oh, that was super helpful. My computer is running faster. This is so cool." And at one point, one of the managers, discovers me, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you do something that's actually useful?" I'm like, "What can I do?" He's like, "Why don't you learn how to program?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know how to program." He's like, "Don't worry about it. I'll send you to a crash course." And then I think a month later, I basically knew how to do like Visual Basic and started programming some of the like first Web 2 self-service applications. But I was too young at the point, so they couldn't actually pay me. So they gave me like free hardware, and I was like in heaven. I was like, "Oh, I have the latest like ThinkPad," and things were great. And so that was really my first foray. So I think I've been around technology and deep tech for a long time. And then in college, I kind of saw that, hey, there's like this whole other area of business, like technical product management and management consulting. And so then I just started trying a bunch of things. I was like, oh, do I like, working for Microsoft and technical product management? Do I like, investment banking? And then after college, I moved more into the business direction, worked for Bain and Company for a couple of years. And after that, worked in TradFi again at Bridgewater in the portfolio construction division, because I kind of discovered that, hey, I enjoy kind of the business studies. I also enjoy learning about capital markets. And then after Bridgewater, I then decided, okay, I need to do something where I feel like my heart's like really fully in it, and basically went back to graduate school, moved back to the Bay Area, went to Stanford, and started my first Web 2 company. It's a company in kind of wellness, B2B wellness, if you will. So we served customers like Amazon and Google and Microsoft with all of their well-being needs, and scaled the company, went through Y Combinator to maybe 650 people, raised about 130 million, drove about 100 million in contracted ARR. And then late 2022, one of my classmates basically calls me up and he says, "Hey, we've been investing in crypto together for a long time, since 2014. Ever since we're in grad school. I know you've been wanting to do something in the industry. I backed a company called Conflux 5 years ago. Ming and Fan want to do something more global scale. You're interested in chatting with them?" And 6 months of co-founder dating later, I was like, wow, these are like the best engineers and computer scientists I've ever worked with. Like, we need to start something. And so it really started with the team. And at that point, I then also said, okay, I'm going to move to a board chair role as part of my other company, and then pursue Zero G full time. So that's kind of how it all came together.
That's awesome, man. It seems like you've stayed pretty busy over the years.
A little bit, but I really like enjoyed the process of learning. I enjoyed the process of like figuring out how things work. And I think that's also what really drew me to Web3, because every like little thing that I go down into is like, how does a consensus layer work? Like, how does modularity work? I could just spend like hours and hours just like reading on top of it and chatting with our team and getting like a really deep understanding. And I just was like super happy.
Was there anything in particular about Web3 that kind of drew you to it? Like some people, it's Bitcoin, others, it's just blockchain as a technology and decentralization, or even, niche things like DeFi or NFTs. Like, was there something in particular?
For me, it was really the sense of like explosion of creativity. I think since the ICO era, I invested in a bunch of companies during that era. But that's where I felt like, wow, people are creating all types of experiments, and this is like super fun. We're trying to build a completely different internet. And I could see the power of the technology itself at that point, and I was just totally enamored. So I would say I've known about Bitcoin probably since 2011, and then kind of got into it, I would say, in 2014, kind of bought some of my first Bitcoin and basically said, like, this seems like a good experiment. I don't know where it'll go. Seems like a great store of value, like digital gold thesis, all of that. Let's see what else we can do. And then really saw that in the ICO boom, where it was really like, hey, we now have a decentralized computer. We can build applications on top of this. This is so cool.
What are you doing with Zero G? What's kind of the overarching mission and what you guys are trying to accomplish with that?
Yeah, we're building the first decentralized AI operating system. And so just like you have a Mac OS, basically a decentralized AI operating system manages all of the kind of physical pieces like the GPUs, the storage, make sure that they're managed well so that you can then build applications and models and agents on top of that, but in a fully decentralized manner. So it's not just a coordination layer for financial incentives, but you can actually build decentralized models and so on. That's our end goal. Now, why is that important? Ming, for example, who is my co-founder and CTO, he built some of the first AI algorithms for Microsoft Research or Microsoft for Bing, the search engine. I used AI algorithms in my previous company to like coordinate different labeling aspects. And some of the things that we saw basically was there's this whole aspect of, we've got closed AI, which ironically, OpenAI is closed AI because you have no idea where the data came from, who labeled it, who made the censorship decisions, how the model was trained, what the weights and biases are. Like you basically have to trust one entity that they're going to do everything for you. And we said, if we look 10 to 20 years from now, that's a very dangerous state of affairs because we want to make sure that AI is safe for human beings in the future, that AI meets human beings' needs. So it doesn't just wake up one day and basically says like, hey, I can actually get all these rewards without having human beings in the loop. And we were really worried that with centralized entities, there would be too much power in the hands of the centralized entities, that could happen at some point. Because a lot of what we're seeing right now, there's a lot of lip service being paid to like, let's make these models safe for us, let's align these models. And so we were really worried. And so decentralized AI is completely opposed to that. Complete provenance trail, complete visibility into how these models are being trained, what data is being used, and so on. So that's why we're building what we're building, is really to make AI a public good.
Interesting. Yeah, I just got back from permissionless, and that was a huge topic of focus for a lot of people. And it was quite surprising, this cross between Web3 and AI, specifically decentralized AI, and trying to work out, certain issues like biases in AI, lack of community being involved, too much centralization around it, maybe that how that can affect certain systems, applications, things that tie into it, things that it touches at some point. And it seems to be growing fairly rapidly at this point now.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, and it needs to happen because even this whole idea of rewards distribution, for example. So right now in the current AI paradigm, the people that are reaping the rewards are hardware manufacturers, AI model creators, and then the people that are selling data to those AI model creators. But the users that are providing the training data are not seeing any of it, and so even that decentralized AI has an answer for.
So I was going through your website and came across some terms that I'm not familiar with that maybe you can help fill me in on. And it's okay to go technical on these too, but I saw something called programmable data availability, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and what that entails for Zero G?
The first thing that we saw in order to put AI fully on chain was basically, let's start at the data and storage layer. So if you ask a bunch of random kind of Web3 AI companies and you ask them, well, where do you store your data today? The most likely answers are going to be Amazon, Google, and so on. So if one of them basically then comes to you and says, hey, you have a model there that's been trained decentrally in a decentralized fashion, it's violating our terms of service, can you please remove the model? You can effectively get censored versus in a decentralized system, you can't. And so we said, okay, we need to start at the data layer to actually make that happen. Then the next realization was, in order to have the throughput required to train some of these really large scale LLM models, we're talking about tens, if not hundreds of gigabytes per second. And what we saw, there was data availability layers that could do about 10 megabytes per second. And then Ethereum does about 80 kilobytes per second. So we're like a million times off from where Ethereum is and where these DA systems need to be so that you can actually train these models fully on chain. And so we then said, okay, how do we design an architecture that can scale to that level in a decentralized fashion? And that's what we've essentially built. We built a really high throughput data availability layer so that we can generate about 50 gigabytes per second in throughput per consensus layer. And then we can horizontally scale consensus layers to even get the full throughput that's required. The other insight was, not only do we need to do this, people will have different data requirements. Some people only need to store data for 2 weeks. Some need to store it for forever. Why should there be only this one guarantee where you just say like, okay, you can use my DA layer, but there's a pruning guarantee of 2 to 3 weeks. And then you have to use some type of indexing plus archival nodes, and then you have to go through this whole mess of like creating this like system, and it's really difficult to utilize and to program. And so we basically just said, let's forget about all this mess. Let's just build it into the protocol directly, so you can then determine where you want the data to be stored for, like sensitive types of models, for example, how long you want the data to be stored, how much you want to pay for the data, how much security you want for the data, like how many replications do you want across the network. And so that really is the idea of programmable DA. You can completely offload state, you can completely offload storage, and then retrieve it at any point in time.
What do you think that'll do for, cost efficiency and, being able to make it, more affordable, and also, also with data, I know that, it can be very clunky sometimes on chain too. Some of these issues exist already in centralized versions of AI, but I imagine some of those things play a factor into, building it on chain too.
Yeah, and this is one of the core breakthroughs, and why I was so enamored with our technical team. We have 8 computer science PhDs, like 5 Olympic gold medalists in informatics, and top university backgrounds, MIT PhDs, Stanford PhDs, Tsinghua PhDs, really kind of top-notch engineering talent. And basically, the breakthrough is that by getting the performance to the levels that I described, we can also dramatically lower the cost. So we can essentially, let me put it into actually terms that are pretty shocking. So if you wanted to store a gigabyte on Ethereum today, or when we started looking at it last year, it will cost you $60 million if you can even store it, fully on chain permanently. Like, why would anybody want to store, multiple gigabytes, yeah, exactly, of models in Ethereum? And so we're able to get it down to $5 per terabyte per month. So completely different like ballpark, and that's even 80% less than what some of the centralized players charge. And so that's just for storage. But then on the DA side, we can also be 100x cheaper than kind of the what's considered the leader in the space, which then means that you can literally build anything in a decentralized environment that you can build in a centralized environment. So now somebody like Epic Games can build Fortnite completely on chain with essentially the same level of cost, or even cheaper on the storage side. So it's like a major breakthrough. So you can actually really build these high performance applications on chain, whether they're AI or on chain gaming or high frequency DeFi, any high performance application. The only barrier now that exists is physical limitations. So like speed of light still is an issue. So if you have really distributed systems with a three-shot consensus, it's really hard to get latency down below 100 milliseconds, for example. So there'll still be constraints like that, but then there's like layer twos and so on that people can build. But yeah, it's a big breakthrough to be able to do that.
Wow, that's fascinating. So is zero G its own network, or do you guys tap into an existing blockchain infrastructure?
So in order to get the performance that I described, we had to basically build our own layer one. And so there's four separate systems. So one is the storage network, two is the data availability network, three is the consensus layer or kind of the chain part of it. And then four is the serving framework that we're going to be releasing very soon, where you can then register as a serving node completely permissionlessly and offer things like inference, fine tuning, eventually, fully on-chain training as well. And so those are the four components of the system. And the only thing that we modified off the shelf was the consensus layer, just because we didn't want to wait for another 6 months before we can release our mainnet, which we're hoping will come kind of first half of next year. So that was the only trade-off that we did. But then eventually we'll have a custom consensus as well and so on.
How interoperable is zero G? So if someone like has already built something, let's say on Ethereum, and they're struggling over there, and they see zero G and they're like, this could be fantastic for us to leverage ourselves, and might be a better network, is a better network. Is there a way for them to kind of migrate over, or kind of bridge over, or is there like a process for that you guys have kind of outlined potentially?
Yeah, depends on what form they build it. If it's a DApp, they can definitely use our serving layer for inference and so on, and our storage layer to kind of offload some of their storage needs. In order to use the DA, they would have to be either an app chain or be on an L2 that is then utilizing the DA, if you will. Eventually, we will likely allow people to build DApps directly on top of our network as well, but initially it's more for kind of the AI applications and layer twos to use.
Okay. And you said mainnet hasn't come out quite yet, right?
Yeah, we're on testnet V2 right now. So mainnet we're expecting first half of next year.
Have you guys had any current use cases through testnet, like that you can kind of highlight as an example of some things that have been kind of built in preparation going towards mainnet?
Yeah, we have about 300 kind of projects building on top of us. And recently we also crossed about 5 million transactions per day. So quite a lot of heavy usage, which we're really proud of. And those use cases generally fall into three buckets, kind of AI-based use cases, and I'll go into that in a second, and then more consumer type of use cases. So like there's on-chain games like Blade Game or Shrapnel that are utilizing our infrastructure. And then there's kind of the traditional infrastructure. So layer twos, like privacy layer twos that are utilizing the DA, RAS providers like AltLayer and Caldera and others that are there. And then the AI bucket is really the biggest bucket because it's all across the AI spectrum. It starts with data generation. So like Mizu, for example, or Masa have been playing around with the system. Then on the cleaning and labeling side, it'll be like public AI and fraction AI. And then on the model creation side, like Sentient and Pond have been utilizing the system. And then it goes to like the inference side, like Aura, which is OPML. And then on the ZKML side, it'll be like Fala and various other networks. And then even the agentic side, like Theoric, and various others are utilizing the system. So all across the AI stack for sure.
Interesting. And in regards to the AI, like would people be able to start building, something similar to like an existing LLM today, like with ChatGPT, for example, or Google's Gemini? Like, is that something that you could also, build on top of zero G?
We're hoping to get there in some period of time. Right now, I think the largest LLM that's been built in a decentralized fashion is about a 10 billion parameter model that I've seen. I think it's Prime Intellect recently kind of published something on that. We're hoping to 10x that in about a few months. And then once that's established, then hopefully another 6 months to actually build some larger scale LLMs. But it'll take time. There's still some open research questions. Some of them are things like, well, how do we actually do batch training? How do we do asynchronous training? How do we deal with like latency constraints if we're using, like consumer GPUs to do some of this training? So there's some fundamental research questions that we're doing a lot of like hardcore research on, for lack of a better word.
I want to ask you a higher level question too. Just stepping back and looking at AI as an industry now and how quickly it's grown just in the last 2 years. Like a lot of this stuff, like even ChatGPT didn't really exist in a consumer facing fashion just 2 years ago, and it's just evolved very, very rapidly. What do you think this space kind of looks like going forward over the next couple of years, or even over the next decade? I'm sure it's just going to be, astronomical growth and just completely compounding. But curious if you have like a vision of maybe what direction that goes, or different possibilities for how that kind of evolves further.
Yeah, I would say just like every company became an internet company after the dot-com boom, every company will need to become an AI company. It's literally a new computing platform that we have to utilize. Um, that being said, and you kind of see it with announcements and, for example, Optimus, the Tesla robot that came out, that's all going to be running on LLMs and agents and so on. Um, that being said, our strong thesis is that there's no future in AI without blockchains. And the reason for that being is that there's kind of the spectrum of use cases. You've got, on one hand, personal use cases like, agent, go order me a pizza or go pay this bill for me. On the other hand, is like big societal use cases. So if you start having agents and models kind of running things like logistic systems, manufacturing systems, like full administrative systems, how are we going to make sure that they are properly aligned? Especially if we're going to start having these like hyper intelligent agents, like ChatGPT's O1 model is 120 IQ. Some of those future models may have 140, 160, 180, maybe beyond that, and at some point beyond human level IQ. So then, how do we make sure these systems are effectively governed for these societal level use cases? And blockchains were designed for that. They were designed for adversarial environments. We have slashing conditions, we've got incentive conditions, so economic level of security, um, and even like smart contract level of security to like properly govern these systems. So how do we ensure that centralized companies are going to do that particular role if most of commerce can be automated? And then again, you're dealing with this like centralization factor that 5 companies in the world will basically control all of commerce at some point. And so that's why it's so important for us to have a decentralized AI counterbalance.
Sounds like AI and blockchain are a perfect married couple, huh?
I would say so. I would say so. Now it's going to take a bit of time for us to reach parity. I hope in 2 to 3 years, decentralized AI from an infrastructure perspective can catch up with centralized AI.
What does your guys' roadmap kind of look like going into 2025? I know you said mainnet's coming up around that period of time as well, but is there anything in particular that developers, users potentially might find very interesting, or that they should look out for?
Yeah, so definitely play around with our testnet. You can both be on the supply side, so running storage nodes, running DA nodes, running validator nodes, running kind of some of these inference nodes if you have a like inference network or fine-tuning network. And then on the demand side, actually utilizing the storage, utilizing the DA, utilizing the serving framework. So definitely, play around with it. What's coming up immediately is our node sale. And so we're really utilizing that as a decentralization mechanism for the network. We fundamentally believe that if you're an owner as part of the network, you're going to make decisions that are much better for the whole of the network. And so we see this as a really great decentralization mechanism, and hopefully the wave of the future of how people think about how do I get more owners into the entire kind of sphere. Versus just what most people have been doing is like, hey, this is another fundraising mechanism for me. Like, let's raise a bunch of cash on top of it. For us, it's more about creating ownership, creating more decentralization with as many stakeholders as possible. So that's a major thing that we're doing this quarter. And then after that, of course, mainnet and TGE is going to be a big, big thing. And then hopefully 6 to 9 months after that, we would then release mainnet v2, where we're then thinking about basically building custom consensus and having some of the decentralized training pieces ready as well. And so just to give you a little bit of a preview, we've done some research already where we used streaming data utilizing our decentralized storage network, and then fine-tuned a 7 billion parameter model. And after a few minutes of catching up, basically there was almost no overhead between the centralized and the decentralized solution. So we were super proud of that. So we're hoping we will have more and more breakthroughs as we go along. At the same time, we're doing a lot of fundamental kind of AI research. So decentralized compute, AI alignment. So if anybody is interested in doing any of that research, definitely write us. Write us on our X. It's just 0G_labs, or me personally at M Heinrich. So M and then last name on X. So pretty active there. Yeah, those are kind of the key pieces of our roadmap.
Awesome. And then if anyone wants to run a node, how would they be able to get started doing that? Where would you direct them?
Yeah, we are just about to release really solid new docs. We got a lot of community feedback, so big shout out to our Discord community, and some of our investors have been really active with it too, and really, really love our community because we've improved our docs, I don't know, 200%. So much easier. So all of those will be on 0g.ai, our website, and if you look at documentation, there'll be documentation for how to run a node, and then we'll also feature a bunch of our community members actually have YouTube videos that they put together in terms of how to run different types of nodes. And so all of that will be super helpful.
Okay. And the community can be primarily found in Discord, right?
Yeah, Discord, X and Discord are kind of the main vehicles. We do have some people also being on Telegram, but primarily it's Discord and X right now.
Michael, this has been fantastic. Thank you for taking the time to come on and share what you guys are doing with 0G. Keep up the great work. I'm very excited for decentralized AI, and you guys building a decentralized AI OS, I think, is also something that's very needed and really cool. So keep me updated on the progress and everything, and excited for your guys' mainnet too.
Thank you. We are excited as well. So we'll keep you updated.
Yep. Let's do another episode when it comes out. We'll do a part 2.
Would love it.
Sounds great, man.